is almost 9 o'clock, and the bookshop is yours again. The last customer left a few minutes ago with a small paper bag and a nod, and you turned the sign on the door from open to closed, and you heard, very faintly, the first drops of rain beginning to tap against the glass. You like this part of the evening best. Not the selling, not the register, not the questions about where to find things, but this, the quiet after. The shop settling into itself the way a house settles at night, with small ticks and creaks that mean nothing at all, except that everything is exactly where it should be. You move along the front of the shop, dimming the overhead lights one bank at a time, until the only light left is warm and low, a scattering of small lamps, tucked between shelves, left on for exactly this reason. The rain is settling in properly now. You can hear it more clearly with the lights lower somehow, as though sound and dimness go together. A steady patter on the window glass, and beyond it, the street outside gone soft and blurred, street lamps smearing gold across the wet pavement. You lock the front door, not because you expect anyone. 9 o'clock on a rainy night is not a busy hour for anyone, but because it is a small, satisfying ritual. The click of the deadbolt, the shop settling into being only yours for a while. You turn the little brass sign one more time, just to be sure, and then you let your hand rest flat against the cool glass of the door for a moment, feeling the faint vibration of the rain against it. A small drumming you can feel more than hear. There's a kettle in the back room, behind the counter, and you fill it and set it to boil, and while you wait, you let your hand trail along the nearest shelf, over spines of every height and color, cloth and paper, old and new, the way you might trail a hand along a fence on a walk you've taken 100 times. The kettle clicks off. You make tea, something simple, something you've made 1,000 times before, so that your hands know exactly what to do without your mind needing to be involved at all. And you carry the cup back out into the shop, into the lamp-lit quiet, into the sound of rain. Outside, the rain is falling harder now, drumming softly against the window at the front of the shop, and somewhere above, a gutter has begun its familiar, uneven trickle. A sound you know so well you no longer really hear it, except that tonight, in the quiet, you do. You breathe in paper and dust and the particular sweetness of old glue and older ink, the smell that lives in every second-hand shop and never quite leaves, no matter how many years pass, no matter how many new books arrive to sit beside the old ones. You walk the length of the front counter, checking, out of habit more than necessity, that everything is where it should be. The till closed, the day's receipts tucked into their drawer, the little dish of pens returned to its place beside the register. Behind you, through the window, the rain has begun to run down the glass in long, unhurried lines, catching the gold of the street lamp and turning, for a moment, into something almost like candlelight. Tonight, there is nowhere else you need to be. At the back corner of the shop, past the last row of shelves, there is a nook that was not really designed, so much as it simply happened. A deep armchair, worn soft at the arms, positioned exactly where the afternoon light used to fall, before the sun went down, and a low window seat beside it looking out over the wet street. You settle into the chair with your tea, and it receives you the way an old chair does, without protest, its cushions already shaped by years of exactly this. A folded blanket sits over the arm of the chair, left there for evenings like this one, and you pull it over your knees, feeling its familiar weight, slightly rough, slightly too warm for anywhere but a rainy night in a quiet shop. Through the window beside you, the street is a soft wash of gray and gold, rain falling in long silver lines under the one working street lamp. The shop fronts across the road dark and closed, their own windows reflecting the wet street back at themselves. You wrap both hands around the teacup and feel the warmth travel up through your fingers, into your wrists, and you let your shoulders drop, an inch, then another, the way they do when a day is finally, fully done. The rain has a rhythm to it now. Not a beat exactly, but something close, a pattern that almost repeats and never quite does. Water finding its way along the same paths down the glass, over and over, tracing and retracing. You take a slow sip of tea. It has cooled to exactly the right temperature, the kind that asks nothing of you, and you set the cup down on the small side table, within reach, and you let your eyes move along the shelf nearest the chair without really reading any of the titles. Somewhere above you, a single bulb in an old brass lamp gives off a low, steady, honey-colored light, and it catches the edges of the nearest books, gilt lettering here and there, a worn cloth spine, the corner of a dust jacket curling gently with age. You notice, without quite meaning to, how the whole shop seems to breathe a little slower after hours. Shelves settling, old wood easing. The building itself loosening its shoulders the way you are only now beginning to loosen yours. The welcome Zyrets, curling it holding chair. You let your head rest back against the wing of the chair, just for a moment, feeling the softness of years of exactly this same small gesture worn into the fabric. You could sit here all night, and some nights you almost have. After a while, you couldn't say how long. Time moves differently in a shop like this after hours. You rise from the chair, leaving the blanket folded back over its arm, and you wander slowly, without any destination, into the narrow aisles between the shelves. The floorboards here are old enough to have their own voice, a soft creak in certain spots that you know by heart, a sound that has never once startled you, because because you know exactly which board it will be before your foot even lands. You let your fingers drift along the spines as you walk, feeling the difference between cloth and leather and paper. Some smooth, some slightly rough, some cool to the touch, some strangely warm, as though they had been holding on to the last of the daylight. The rain sounds different back here, softer, filtered through more walls and more shelves, though every so often a gust of wind presses it briefly harder against a window pane somewhere, and you hear it rise and settle again, like a held breath let go. You pause at a shelf of old travel books, their covers faded to soft blues and greens, and you slide one out at random, feeling its weight in your hand, the particular give of a spine that has been opened many times by many different people, none of whom you will ever know. You do not read it, not really. You flip it open near the middle, glance at a paragraph without following it closely. Let your eyes rest on the shape of the words more than their meaning, and something in that is its own kind of restful, like listening to a language you almost understand. You slide it back into its place and move on, past a shelf of poetry, past a shelf of maps rolled and tied with string, past a low table stacked with books, waiting to be sorted and priced, their titles, a small unplanned poem all their own. Further along, a shelf of old atlases leans slightly against the wall, their spines cracked white with age. And you run one finger along the top edge of the row, feeling the small ridge where the pages have swollen very gently with years of damp autumn evenings, just like this one. A little further still, a low shelf holds nothing but children's books, their covers bright even in the dim light. And you crouch for a moment and look at the spines without pulling any of them out, remembering faintly being small enough for these same stories to feel enormous. Lilyfoot. You pass a small rolling ladder tucked against the tallest shelf, unused tonight, and you rest one hand on its cool rail for a moment as you pass, the way you might rest a hand on the shoulder of an old friend in passing, without needing to stop. The very top shelves are lost in shadow now, the lamplight not quite reaching that high, and you like that too. The idea that some of the shop keeps its own secrets even from you, even after all these years of closing it up alone. Near the very back of the shop, tucked behind a shelf that holds the oldest stock, there is a narrow gap where a single high window lets in a little of the street light, and the rain traces slow lines down that glass too, lit gold for a moment before falling into shadow again. You stand there a while, doing nothing in particular, simply being somewhere quiet, somewhere dry. While the rain does the work of filling the silence outside for you. On your way back toward the reading nook, something catches your eye on the low table of unsorted books. A small, unassuming volume, its cloth cover a faded green, no title visible on the spine at all, as though it had worn away decades before you were born. You pick it up. It's lighter than you expect, thin, its pages slightly soft at the edges the way old paper gets. And when you open the cover, there's no author's name, no publisher's mark, only a single line in careful handwriting on the first blank page, for whoever finds this next. You carry it back to the chair, settle in again, pull the blanket back over your knees, and open it properly this time, tilting it slightly toward the lamp. It isn't a novel, not quite, more a collection of small observations, a page or two at a time, written by someone who clearly liked evenings very much like this one. You read, slowly, half aloud in your own mind. There is a particular kind of rain that seems to slow the whole world down with it. And if you are lucky enough to be indoors when it starts, the very best thing you can do is nothing at all. You turn the page. Another short passage. This one about the sound a kettle makes just before it boils. The small rising note that means warmth is coming. That means someone, somewhere, is about to be looked after, even if that someone is only themselves. You smile, faintly, and turn another page. This one is about the particular hush of a shop after closing, how the same shelves that felt busy and bright all day take on a completely different character once the lights go low, as though they too are allowed to rest. Another page, longer this time, describes a habit the writer clearly loved, choosing one book at random from the unsorted table each night, reading only a page or two, and returning it in the morning without ever finding out how the story ends, content to simply visit rather than to finish. Another page, shorter. The best chair in any room is the one that has been sat in enough times to remember you. Choose that one, always, and let it hold you. The handwriting grows a little looser here, a little more tired, as though the person writing it had been closer and closer to sleep with every entry, the letters leaning gently into one another, the way your own thoughts are beginning to lean into sleep. page you read before your eyes grow heavy says only this: if you have found this book on a rainy night, you are exactly where you are meant to be. Rest here a while. The shop will keep. You let the book rest closed in your lap, one hand still resting on its cover, and you lean your head back against the chair, and you listen to the rain, which has not stopped, which does not seem to have any intention of stopping. You look up once toward the window beside you and watch the street for a while without any particular reason to. A single figure passes beneath the street lamp, umbrella tilted against the wind, footsteps quick and purposeful, gone again within a few seconds, swallowed by the rain and the dark beyond the lamp's small circle of gold. You wonder, briefly and without urgency, where they might be headed on a night like this, and then you let the thought go, the way you let most thoughts go here, without needing an answer. The shop front directly across the street has a striped awning, and you watch small rivers form along its lowest edge, gathering and falling in a slow, steady drip that catches the streetlight each time, over and over, a tiny golden clock keeping its own quiet time. Somewhere further down the block, a traffic light changes from red to green to yellow and back again. For no one, its colors blurring softly through the wet glass, patient and unwatched. You watch it complete one full, slow cycle, and then you let your eyes drift back to the room around you, to the lamp, to the shelves, to the book still resting in your lap. Further down, past the corner, the awning of the old bakery glows faintly from a single light left on inside, and you can just make out the shapes of empty trays through the window, waiting for the early morning to fill them again. A bus passes, once, far slower than it would in daylight, its windows lit and empty, and its tires make a long, low hush against the wet road that rises and fades like a held note. Then the street is empty again. Just rain, just street lamp, just the soft golden reflection running down every wet surface in sight, over and over. The whole scene repeating itself patiently, without needing you to watch it at all. You could watch it forever. This small, unremarkable street, doing nothing but existing, quietly in the rain. And there is something in that. The ordinary, going on so gently, that settles something in your chest you hadn't realized was unsettled. The rain has grown heavier while you sat there, though you couldn't say exactly when. It simply arrived at this fuller, steadier sound, sometime between one quiet moment and the next, filling the shop from every window at once. You close your eyes, just for a moment, just to listen more closely, and the sound seems to widen when you do, the way sounds do when sight steps aside and lets hearing take the lead. Somewhere near the front of the shop, a loose pane rattles very faintly with each gust of wind, a small, familiar imperfection you've meant to fix for years and somehow never minded enough to actually fix, because tonight, at least, it only adds one more soft note to everything else. Your tea has gone cold in its cup on the side table, and you don't reach for it. There is nothing left to do tonight that needs doing. The register is closed. The door is locked. The lights are low. The rain is falling exactly the way rain falls when it plans to keep falling for a long while yet. You feel your body settle further into the chair, weight sinking into the cushions in a way that feels less like sitting and more like being held. The blanket warm over your knees, the old book still resting closed beneath your hand. Your breathing has slowed to match the rain, or perhaps the rain has slowed to match your breathing. It's hard to say which came first, and it doesn't especially matter. Somewhere out on the street, a shop awning flaps once, gently, caught by a stronger gust, and then settles again, and the rain simply continues, patient, unbothered, filling every gap in the night with its own soft, even sound. The lamp beside you casts its small circle of gold light over the arm of the chair, over the edge of the book, over your own hand resting there, and everything just beyond that circle softens into a gentle, unfocused dark. Shelves and spines and quiet corners blurring into shapes you know by heart without needing to see clearly. You are warm. You are dry. Somewhere outside, the whole rest of the world is getting rained on, and none of it can reach you here. Every so often, the rain seems to gather itself into something briefly heavier, a fuller rush against the glass, and then eases back again into its steadier rhythm, the way breathing sometimes catches and settles, catches and settles. You notice the particular quality of the dark beyond the window now. Not black, never quite black in a city, but a deep, soft, blue-gray, rain-washed and gentle, the kind of dark that asks nothing of your eyes at all. The old radiator beneath the window seat has gone quiet again. Its work for the evening finished, the whole room holding its warmth now, without any help, the way a stone holds the last of the sun long after it has set, sitting there warm and unhurried. You find your mind drifting back over the day, not in any worried way, just gently, the way you might flip back through a few pages you've already read. There was the older man this afternoon, the one who comes in most Tuesdays, who never buys anything but always spends a long, contented hour in the history section and always says the same thing on his way out. Quiet than anywhere else in town, isn't it? And you always agree, because it's true. There was the young woman who asked, shyly, if you had anything about lighthouses, and you walked her to the shelf yourself, and watched her face soften when she found exactly the one she hadn't known she was looking for. There was a child, earlier still, tugging at a parent's sleeve, pointing at a picture book with a dragon on the cover. And the small, delighted sound they made when the parent finally said yes. None of it was remarkable. None of it needed to be. Just small, quiet exchanges. The kind that happen in a shop like this every single day. Mostly unnoticed, mostly unremembered by anyone but you. You think, too, of the regulars who aren't regulars anymore. The woman who used to come in every Friday for mysteries and stopped, years ago now, without you ever learning why. And you still, sometimes, save a good one aside out of habit, just in case. These are not sad thoughts. Not tonight. They drift through you the way the rain drifts down the window. Present, gentle, moving on before they can settle anywhere too heavy. You turn another page, and the handwriting settles into a new passage, a little smaller than the last, as though the writer had leaned in closer to the lamp. This one is about a kitchen, not a shop. A small kitchen, somewhere with thin walls, where the rain sounds different on a tin roof than it does anywhere else. Brighter somehow, quicker. 100 small taps instead of one long hush. There is a kettle here too, an old one, dented on one side from years of being set down too firmly, and it takes its time coming to the boil the way old kettles do, muttering to itself long before it truly begins. Whoever is standing at this stove is in no hurry. They have lined up a single cup, a single saucer, a tin of tea gone slightly soft with age, and they are watching the window above the sink, where the glass has fogged from the inside, blurring the dark garden beyond into nothing but shapes. A hedge, maybe. A gate, maybe. It hardly matters which. The kettle finds its note at last, that thin, rising whistle, and somewhere in the next room a clock that is slow by 11 minutes keeps its own patient count, unconcerned with being corrected, unconcerned with anything at all, except its own small ticking, which fills the kitchen as completely as the rain fills the garden outside. Further down the page, the same hand describes a train, though not a fast one, and not one going anywhere in particular. A branch line, the kind that stops at every small station, whether anyone is waiting or not. And on this evening no one is waiting, and still the train stops, patient as a held breath, before easing forward again into the dark. Inside, the carriage is nearly empty. Rain streaks sideways across the windows, catching the amber of each passing lamp and pulling it into long smears of gold that slide backward into the night. Someone has left the window cracked at the top, just enough for the smell of wet gravel and diesel and distant fields to drift in beneath the warm smell of the heater ticking under the seats. The seats themselves are that particular shade of tired blue that train seats always seem to be. The fabric gone slightly bald at the armrests from decades of other people's elbows, other people's Tuesdays. No one checks the time. There is nowhere else being expected of anyone tonight. The train simply goes where the rails go, unhurried, and the rain goes with it the whole way, tapping its small applause against the glass for no audience but the one sitting quietly inside, watching the dark fields blur past like something being gently erased. A shorter page follows, only a few lines, about a library in a town whose name is never given. It is after hours there too, it seems, the same as the shop, and the same rain is falling. Or perhaps it is only rain in general, the kind that exists in every town on nights like this. A single librarian moves along the stacks with a small cart, not shelving anything urgently, simply returning what has drifted out of place during the day, sliding each spine home with the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle piece finding its socket. The reading room lamps have been dimmed to their lowest setting, leaving pools of warm light around each long table, and darkness pooling comfortably between them. Somewhere near the back, a radiator knocks twice and falls silent, the way old radiators do, as if clearing its throat before deciding against speaking after all. The rain against the tall windows sounds almost like static, a soft and constant hush that makes the whole room feel sealed away from whatever hour it actually is outside, suspended instead in its own smaller, gentler time, where the only task left is the pleasant one of putting things quietly back where they belong. The next page describes a greenhouse, glass on every side, and rain has a different voice again here. 100 small percussions on 100 small panes, layered until it becomes almost a kind of music, uneven and lovely. Inside, the air is warm and green-smelling, thick with soil and leaf and the particular mineral scent of water, landing on clay pots. Someone has left a lantern hanging from a hook near the door, its light catching the undersides of broad leaves and turning them the color of old lanterns themselves, amber going toward green. Rows of small plants sit in their trays, waiting for a morning that is still hours away, needing nothing further from anyone tonight. A folding chair has been left open near the potting bench, as though someone sat here recently just to listen, and perhaps they still are, unseen, part of the scene rather than separate from it. The glass roof holds the whole soft racket of the rain above, without ever quite letting the cold in, so that the greenhouse becomes its own small climate, its own small country, generous and green, and completely unconcerned with the wider, wetter, colder world just beyond its thin and steaming walls. You look up briefly here, resting the book against your knee. Outside your own window, the rain has not changed at all, still finding the same glass in the same unhurried way, and for a moment the two rains, the one on the page and the one on the pane, seem to be keeping the same soft time together, matching each other tap for tap the way two clocks in the same house will sometimes fall into step without ever being asked to. You let your eyes rest on the dark shelves a moment longer, on the small brass lamp, on the shape of your own knees beneath the blanket. And then, because there is nowhere else you would rather be, you turn back to the page. This entry is about a harbor town, though a small one. More fishing boats than yachts, more coiled rope than polished brass. The rain here comes in off the water itself, salted and steady, drumming on the corrugated roofs of the boat sheds lining the quay. A single lamp burns above the door of the chandlery, closed for the night, its window full of coiled line and old brass fittings gone soft with dust. Somewhere out past the breakwater, a bell buoy tolls, slow and irregular, marking nothing more urgent than the swell that moves it, and the sound carries in over the water and through the rain like something being remembered rather than heard. A cat sits beneath the eaves of the harbor master's shed, dry and entirely unbothered, watching the boats rock gently at their moorings, their small lights doubled in the black water below them. Nothing here is waiting to happen. The tide will turn when it turns. The rain will ease when it eases. For now there is only the bell, the boats, the cat, and the steady percussion of water finding water. Over and over, patient as the moon that pulls it, the handwriting shifts again, smaller still, cramped into the margin, as if the writer had run short of room and simply kept going. This page describes an attic, the kind found only in very old houses, where the roofline slopes so low on either side that a person can only stand upright down the very center. Rain on a roof this close overhead is louder than rain anywhere else in a house. Nearly conversational, a constant patter just above the crown of the head. Trunks line the walls, their brass latches gone, the soft green of old pennies, and a single bulb on a long cord throws more shadow than light, though somehow that suits the room better than brightness would. Someone has opened one trunk and left it that way, a scatter of old letters spilling gently over its edge, tied in ribbon that has faded from whatever color it once was into a color that only very old ribbon becomes. No one is reading them tonight. They simply sit there, patient as everything else in this story tends to be, while the rain finds every angle of the old roof above and turns the whole attic into a kind of drum, soft-headed, unhurried, keeping time for no one in particular. A longer page follows, describing a night ferry crossing some strait or other. The name never given, only the crossing itself. 2 hours, maybe 3, through water gone the color of pewter under a sky with no visible moon. Inside the lounge, most of the seats sit empty, the upholstery a shade of maroon that has clearly seen several decades of ferry crossings, worn pale at the headrests. Rain streaks the salt-crusted windows in long diagonal lines, catching the ship's own lights and scattering them into short-lived halos before the wind pulls them sideways again. A vending machine hums quietly near the stairwell, its glow the only sharp color in the room, though no one approaches it. Somewhere below, the engines keep their steady thrum, felt more than heard, a vibration traveling up through the souls of anyone sitting still enough to notice it. On deck, if anyone were foolish enough to go out in this, the wind would take the rain sideways entirely. But no one is out there tonight. Everyone has chosen the warm, dim lounge instead, chosen stillness, chosen the small rocking motion of the sea beneath them, patient as a cradle, carrying them steadily toward a shore they are not yet in any hurry to see. Here the ink grows fainter, as though the same pen had been used for a very long time without refilling. And the next passage is shorter for it, describing only a garden shed, small and cluttered, warm despite itself from an old paraffin heater, set low in one corner. Rain finds the corrugated roof in the same 100 small percussions as the greenhouse 2 pages back, though here it mixes with the smell of turned earth and cut wood and the faint sweetness of stored apples in a crate along one wall. A radio, unseen, murmurs something too quiet to make out, more company than information, filling the small space with a low and friendly static beneath the rain. Tools hang along one wall, in shapes worn smooth by a single pair of hands over many years, each one exactly where it belongs, the way things become when someone has cared for them a very long time. There is a stool here, and someone has clearly been sitting on it, doing nothing more than listening, the way you are doing nothing more than reading, both of you occupying the same kind of stillness, though separated by however many pages, however many years, however much rain has fallen between the writing of this and the reading of it now. You shift slightly in the chair, tucking one foot up beneath you, and the book settles more comfortably against your palm. Your tea, if you still had any, would be entirely cold by now, though you find you do not mind. The lamp beside you holds its small circle of gold, steady against the deepening dark beyond it, and the rain outside continues in its long, unbroken line, needing nothing from you but your continued and unhurried attention, which it has completely. The next page is about a mountain hut, high enough that the rain sometimes turns to something colder, without quite becoming snow, a wet and heavy sleet that ticks differently against the small windows than ordinary rain does. Inside, a stove holds the only real light, its door left slightly ajar, so the orange glow spills out across the wooden floor in a long, low wedge. Boots sit drying by the door. Someone's, everyone's, lined up the way boots line up in places where people have walked a long way to arrive. A pot of something simple sits warming at the edge of the stove, more for the smell of it than any real hunger. And a single bunk along the far wall holds a sleeping bag already unrolled, waiting. Wind pushes at the walls now and then, testing them, finding them solid, and the hut answers only with its old and familiar creak, the sound of a building that has weathered a great many nights exactly like this one, and intends to weather a great many more. Whoever built the fire is not thinking about morning yet. There is only this: the stove, the boots, the low percussion of sleet against glass, and the particular kind of quiet that only exists very far from anywhere else. Another entry describes an inn along some old coach road, the kind of place with low black beams and a fire that has clearly not gone out in a very long time, banked each imagines the small leaded windows here in fat, unhurried drops, magnified and warped by the old uneven glass into shapes that shift and slide as they fall. A dog lies stretched before the hearth, twitching faintly in some private dream, entirely unbothered by the low murmur of the 2 or 3 other guests scattered at other tables, each wrapped in their own quiet. The innkeeper polishes a glass that is already clean, more out of habit than necessity, and glances now and then toward the window as though checking on the rain the way one checks on an old friend, simply to see how they are getting on. Nobody here is in any hurry to go up to their room. The fire is too good, the rain too steady, the whole low-beamed room too entirely suited to sitting a while longer. And so they do, all of them, together and separately, listening to the same fire and the same rain, and thinking their own private and unhurried thoughts. This page is shorter, almost a fragment, describing only a single window in a house, otherwise unnamed. A deep sill, wide enough to sit in, cushioned with something soft and slightly flattened by years of exactly this use. Whoever sits there has drawn their knees up, has let the curtain fall half across their shoulder, has stopped, for the moment, being anywhere except exactly here. The glass is cool against one temple. The street below is empty, or nearly so. One lamp doing what it can against the dark, its light broken into long gold threads by the rain sliding down the pane. There is no story here, the writer notes. Only the sitting, only the watching, only the small contentment of having nowhere else that needs you and knowing it fully. All the way down. The way you sometimes only know a thing when your whole body has already agreed to it, before your mind has caught up. The book turns, a few pages later, to a small village bakery, closed for the night the way your own shop is closed. Flour still faintly dusting one corner of the front step where it was swept out at closing, and not quite all of it made it to the bin. Inside, through the glass, the ovens have gone dark and cool for the first time all day, though the whole room still holds a warmth that will not fully leave until morning, along with a smell that has soaked so deeply into the walls that no amount of rain outside could ever touch it. Trays sit stacked and washed along the back counter, ready for an early hour that has not yet arrived. Rain taps at the single high window near the ceiling, the kind of window built more for ventilation than for view, and its glass rattles faintly now and then in its old frame, a small sound the baker has long since stopped hearing as anything other than familiar. Somewhere above the shop, a lamp still burns in a single window. Someone still awake, still listening. The whole quiet building settling around them the way your own shop is settling around you now. Brick and beam and old glass, easing gently into the night. The next passage, longer again, describes a small observatory on a hill outside some town, its dome closed tonight against the rain and the low cloud that has swallowed whatever stars might otherwise have been visible. Inside, A single desk lamp illuminates star charts spread across a broad table, though no one is using them tonight. Not really, only turning their pages now and then the way you turn the pages of this very book, for the pleasure of the turning, as much as anything printed there. Rain finds the metal dome overhead with a sound unlike any of the other roofs in this collection, a high metallic patter, almost bright, echoing faintly inside the curved space above. The great telescope sits shrouded under its canvas cover, patient, unbothered by a single night's postponement, the way anything built to measure years rather than evenings tends to be. Whoever keeps this small building for the town has made tea, of course, because everyone in every page of this small green book seems to have made tea and sits now with both hands around the cup, watching not the sky, which offers nothing tonight, but the rain itself, which offers everything it has, freely, to anyone patient enough to simply listen. A brief page follows, describing a small boat cabin, moored rather than sailing, tied fast against a dock somewhere the writer never names. The rain on a low cabin roof sounds closer than rain anywhere else, nearly personal. Each drop a small, distinct event rather than part of a general hush. A single oil lamp swings almost imperceptibly with the boat's own gentle rocking, its light sliding back and forth across the low wooden ceiling in a slow, patient arc. Someone lies in the narrow bunk, not yet asleep, listening to the rain on the roof and the water against the hull. Two different rhythms that never quite align, and somehow are more soothing for it, like two hands patting a slow and separate time. The boat shifts gently at its mooring, testing its ropes, finding them sound, and settles again. And whoever is lying there listening feels the small movement travel up through the mattress and into their own tired shoulders, rocked, held, entirely unhurried toward whatever hour sleep finally decides to arrive. Here the handwriting grows warmer somehow, looser, as though the writer had grown more comfortable with themselves several pages in. And this entry describes an old apothecary shop, not unlike your own, in its way, glass jars lining every shelf instead of books, their labels handwritten in a script grown soft and brown with age. Rain finds the single narrow window at the front in long, unhurried streaks, and the gaslight the shop still keeps, more for atmosphere than necessity, throws a low green gold light across the polished counter. The chemist, if that is still the right word for someone who mostly just enjoys the shop after hours now, sits on a high stool behind the counter, turning a small brass scale over in one hand, its pans catching the lamplight and losing it again as it turns. Nothing needs weighing tonight. It is simply pleasant to hold, the way an old and well-used object is always pleasant to hold, familiar in the hand the way a favorite word is familiar in the mouth. Outside, the rain has settled into the same long, patient rhythm as everywhere else in this book, as though it were, in fact, the very same rain, simply visiting each of these small rooms in turn, checking that all was well, and pause again here and look toward your own window, where the street lamp still holds its small, steady watch over the wet and empty road. It occurs to you gently, without any real weight to the thought, that perhaps it is the same rain in every one of these pages. After all, an old rain, well-traveled, visiting one small, warm room after another. On nights very much like this one, checking in on kettles and lamps and quiet readers the whole world over before moving on to the next rooftop, the next window, the next patient listener. You do not know if that is true. It does not especially need to be. You turn another page. The next entry is the longest yet, describing a village on some coastline the writer never quite names, where every house seems built to lean gently into the weather rather than against it. Slate roofs the color of wet pewter, narrow lanes running down toward a harbor that cannot be seen from here but can certainly be heard. Waves finding the seawall in a slow, patient rhythm beneath the steadier percussion of rain on slate. A single shop window glows near the bottom of the lane, its glass fogged from the inside, and through the blur a figure moves slowly between shelves, restocking something, or perhaps only rearranging what is already perfectly arranged, the way people sometimes do late in the evening, simply to have something gentle for their hands to do. Smoke rises from 3 or 4 chimneys along the lane, bent sideways by the wind, before it thins into the low gray cloud, pressing down over the whole village like a blanket someone has drawn up to the chin. Nobody in this village seems to be hurrying anywhere. A door opens somewhere, briefly spilling gold light and a snatch of quiet music into the wet lane, then closes again, and the rain continues exactly as it was, patient, unbroken, entirely unconcerned with doors or music or any of the small, warm lives sheltering just behind its long gray curtain. A shorter passage follows, describing simply a bed in a room otherwise unnamed, blankets turned down on one side, as though someone had only just risen or was only just about to lie down. It is not quite clear which. Rain sounds against a window somewhere nearby, muffled by a curtain drawn. Most, but not all the way closed. A single low lamp glows on a bedside table beside a book left open. And face down, its spine, no doubt complaining faintly at the treatment, the way spines do. The whole room holds the particular hush of a house where everyone else has already gone to sleep, where the only sounds left are the rain and the settling of old wood, and perhaps, very faintly, the sound of one's own breathing, slow and even, and entirely without urgency, matching itself without effort to the steady percussion outside. The next page describes a small chapel, unused for regular services now, kept more for its quiet than its purpose. Stone walls holding the cold at bay just barely, warmed by nothing more than a few candles set along the sill. Rain finds the old leaded windows here in colors, red and blue and amber, where the glass has been stained for 100 years or more, throwing faint smudges of tinted light across the stone floor whenever the clouds outside thin enough to let any light through at all, which tonight they do not. So the windows stay dark, patient, waiting for a moon that has not troubled to appear. Someone sits in the back pew, not praying exactly, simply sitting, the way people sit in old, quiet buildings sometimes, borrowing their stillness for a while. The rain on the roof here is very soft, filtered through centuries of thick stone and thicker beams, arriving at the ears as barely more than a suggestion, a rumor of weather rather than the weather itself. And in that softened hush, the whole small chapel seems to hold its breath, along with the person sitting in it, waiting for nothing, needing nothing, simply being quiet together for a while. A few pages on, the writing turns to a lighthouse, and you find yourself reading this one a little more slowly, though you could not say why. It stands at the very end of a headland, alone, the way lighthouses tend to be. Its light turning in its own unhurried rhythm above a sea gone dark and restless below. Rain here comes almost sideways, driven by a wind that has nowhere flat to spend itself, and it finds the thick glass of the lamp room in long horizontal streaks that the great lens turns briefly to gold each time the beam sweeps past. Down in the small keeper's room at the base of the tower, a kettle sings on a 2-ring stove, and someone sits close beside it in a chair bolted sensibly to the floor. Charts lie rolled in one corner, needed only rarely now that the light does most of the work on its own, turning and turning, patient as breathing, sweeping its long, slow beam out across water that cannot be seen but can certainly be heard, wave after wave, arriving out of the dark and going still again, arriving and going still, the whole night, measured out in that one steady, generous, revolving beam. Not far past the lighthouse, a shorter page describes a paper lantern maker's shop in some old quarter of some old town. Shutters drawn for the night, but the workroom still lit. Warm paper stretched over bamboo frames, drying in careful rows along one wall. Rain finds the tiled roof outside in quick, soft patters, and through the single open transom drifts the smell of wet stone, mixed with glue and rice paper, and the faint sweetness of the ink pots left open on the workbench. The lantern maker's hands move without needing to be watched, folding, pasting, setting each finished shape aside to dry. The motion so practiced, it has become its own kind of rest rather than labor. A single finished lantern hangs already lit near the door, testing itself, and its glow falls soft and orange across the wet step outside, catching the rain as it falls past in a slow curtain of small bright threads. There and gone, there and gone, patient as the folding hands that made the light that shows them. A brief entry follows about a small countryside post office, closed hours ago, though the postmistress has stayed on a while longer than she needed to, sorting the last of the day's letters into their proper slots. By lamplight alone, rain taps at the high counter window in the unhurried way of rain that has settled in for the whole night and knows it. Pigeonholes line the back wall, each one holding some small piece of someone else's evening. A letter, a parcel slip, a postcard from somewhere warmer than here, and she moves along them slowly. In no rush now that the queue is long gone and the till is counted, and the whole small building belongs, for this last quiet hour, only to her and the rain, and the soft click of envelopes finding their places. Outside, the village green has gone the deep wet green. It only turns after hours of steady rain, and the single lamp above the post office door throws its small gold circle out across the puddled path, patient, welcoming, though no one is expected, and no one comes. The last of these longer pages describes a room you do not have a name for at first, until you realize, a few lines in, that it is a scriptorium, the kind of quiet writing room kept by those who copy old books by hand, candlelight and ink, and the soft scratch of a nib. The only sounds besides the rain finding the narrow windows set high in thick stone walls. A single figure sits bent over a wide-sloped desk, copying some page from some older book onto a newer one, unhurried, exact, pausing now and then, simply to let the ink dry, or perhaps simply to listen to the rain outside, which reaches this room as little more than a distant hush, softened by stone, the way a voice is softened by a closed door. Shelves of finished volumes line every wall, their spines 100 shades of brown and green and faded red, each one copied out by some equally patient hand on some equally rainy night long ago, so that the whole room seems to hold not just books, but evenings, stacked one on top of another, each one this same quiet, this same rain, this same small, steady light. You realize, turning this page, that your own eyes have grown heavier than they were even a few pages ago, and you let them close for just a moment, just to rest them, the book still held loosely against your chest, one finger keeping your place out of old habit rather than any real need. The rain continues exactly as it has all evening, unbroken, unbothered, and somewhere beneath its steady sound you can still feel the shape of the last page in your mind. The chapel, the candles, the quiet stone, settling slowly into something softer and less defined, the way a thought does, just before it becomes the beginning of a dream. When you open your eyes again, only a moment seems to have passed, though you cannot be entirely sure of that. The lamp still burns exactly as it did. The rain still falls exactly as it did. You find your place again and read on. And the next page, the last full one before the handwriting, begins to thin toward the end of the book, describes nothing more than a chair very much like your own, in a room very much like this one, holding someone very much like you, at the end of a day, very much like this day, listening to rain, very much like this rain, and finding in all of that likeness, not repetition but a kind of company, as though every rainy evening ever spent quietly indoors were somehow the same evening, visited again and again by whoever needed it most, exactly when they needed it. The rain continues, filling in the quiet spaces between one memory and the next, and you let your thoughts slow further until they are less like thoughts and more like the last light of a lamp, dimming very, very gradually. At some point, you rise once more, slowly, the blanket sliding from your knees, and you make one last slow round of the shop, not because anything needs checking, but because your body wants the small motion before it allows itself to fully rest. You walk past the counter, past the till, past the little dish of pens, and everything is exactly as you left it, waiting patiently for morning the way it always does. You glance once more toward the front window, where the rain is still falling in its long silver lines. The street outside empty now, the last of the passing cars long gone. Only the street lamp left, keeping watch over the wet pavement. You reach up and turn off the lamp nearest the counter, and then the next, moving slowly back toward the reading nook, leaving only the one small brass lamp burning beside the chair. Exactly enough light to find your way back to it. The shop grows softer with every lamp you dim, shadows gathering gently in the corners, shelves receding into a comfortable dark, until only your own small corner remains lit, warm and golden against the rest of the quiet. You settle back into the chair one final time, pulling the blanket up again, and you let the green book rest closed on the side table now, its work for tonight already done. The rain has not let up at all. If anything, it has settled into something even steadier, a sound with no urgency left in it, a sound that has stopped trying to get anywhere and is simply falling, the way it will keep falling long after you've stopped noticing. You glance once more at the darkened shelves around you, rows and rows of quiet spines, standing patient watch in the dim, each one holding some small world inside it, none of them needing to be opened tonight. Tomorrow they will be pulled out, priced, discussed, carried off in paper Your eyes have stopped opening between paragraphs now, and that's all right. There's nothing left to read tonight that can't wait until morning, when the shop will open again, when the sign will turn back to open, when the rain, if it's even still falling by then, will have to share the day with footsteps and voices and the small bell over the door. But that is tomorrow's shop. Tonight's shop is only this: rain on old glass, a lamp burning low, a chair that knows the exact shape of you, and a green book resting closed within reach. You let your head rest fully against the wing of the chair. The blanket has grown warm all the way through now, holding your own warmth back against you instead of letting it go. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls once, low and unhurried, more felt than heard, a soft reminder that the storm is settling in for the whole night, with no urgency in it at all. You do not need to keep listening for anything in particular anymore. There is nothing to wait for. No one is coming. No closing tasks are left undone. There is only the rain, and the lamp, and the chair, and the long, easy pull towards sleep. Let your thoughts go soft and slow, the way the light already has, the way the rain already has, the way the whole shop has settled, shelf by shelf, into stillness around you. Somewhere above, the last loose gutter finds its steady rhythm again, and somewhere below, the old floorboards have gone still and silent, and somewhere in between, exactly here, in this one warm circle of lamplight, you are already halfway to sleep. The rain will still be falling when you wake. Most likely, softer by morning perhaps, or perhaps not. It doesn't matter which, because it isn't yours to worry about until then. For now, there is only the chair and the blanket and the small gold circle of the lamp and the long, unhurried dark stretching out ahead of you, asking nothing, holding everything. You are safe here. You are warm here. The rain will keep falling long after you've stopped noticing it, tracing the same patient lines down the same dark glass, needing nothing from you at all. Rest now. Just rest.